Afternoon, Emily Kyler Green, attorney for the department.
Catherine Shelf, permanency specialist with Belong.
April Poulos, permanency supervisor with Belong.
Irene Acosta, attorney ad litem, appointed to represent the respondent mother, Grace Vance. Ms. Vance, can you unmute and announce, please?
Grace Vance, mother.
Alana
Richard
Pearsall.
Sorry.
Sorry, go ahead.
You go ahead.
Alana Pearsall, attorney for the father, Miles Benz, who's present and we're ready. Mr. Benz, can you introduce yourself?
Miles Benz.
Richard Saldivar for Daniel Roscoe, the father. Mr. Roscoe, will you unmute and announce, please?
Yeah, Daniel Roscoe, father.
Emily Venegas, foster mom.
Jill Roden, Tri-County CASA.
Deborah Fuller, attorney ad litem for the children. Ready.
We're here today for an initial permanency hearing. And Mr. Saldivar has a motion for ATP. Those are the two things that are on the docket for today.
Yes, Judge.
Okay, can we hear it all together?
I believe so, Your Honor. And just to update the court, I've conferred on my motion. I believe the department, CASA, and the ad litem are in agreement with my motion, Judge.
That's correct.
Yes, Your Honor.
And Your Honor, I haven't had the opportunity to confer with any of the parties on Mr. Saldivar's motion.
I'll go just a couple minutes. I have to get on the road at a decent hour today, so I'm going to let y'all confer for a few minutes. Just try to be as efficient as possible about it. I've already got a few of you assigned to room 1. I'm going to
And
go
Judge,
ahead and
we have no position on the motion. It doesn't concern my client's child.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and let you go into the breakout room anyways, Ms. Pearsall, in case you have anything you want to add, but I appreciate you letting me know your position. Now that you've all had a chance to confer, have you made any progress on the ATP?
No, Your Honor, my client is opposed to it.
Right. Then let's go ahead and get started on the permanency hearing. And if you could weave your evidence that you both have for or against, that would be most efficient for our time.
Judge, I'd like to invoke the rule before we start.
Okay. It looks like the only people subject to the rule would be Ms. Whalen, Ms. Venegas, and then Ms. Kyler Green. Who would you call? Ms. Schoaf?
Yes, Your Honor. So Ms. Poulos, I guess, will be excluded.
All right. The rule has been invoked. What that means is exclusionary rule of witnesses, 614, I think, if I remember correctly. That means that anybody who's not a material party or designated witness has to leave the courtroom and go back into the waiting room. That means that you can't talk about it with anybody else. And because we're virtual, you can't text about anybody. You can't message with anybody about anything that's going on in the hearing. So when you're in the waiting room, subject to the rule, just don't read anything from anybody and don't send anything to anybody if you're in the hearing to the people in the waiting room. That's to protect people from hearing other people's testimony. Okay. So Ms. Venegas, you're subject to the rule. I'm going to put you in the waiting room. Ms. Poulos and Ms. Whalen. Is anybody potentially going to call Ms. Whalen? She's just a CMO. She's observing. So I don't think that she really should be subject to the rule.
I have no problem with that, Judge.
Okay. All right. You can continue to observe, Ms. Whalen. All right. Then I think I accidentally just brought Ms. Venegas back in here. Okay, I did. All right. That should cover it. Any other housekeeping issues? Okay. I'm going to question Ms. Schoaf on the permanency issues and allow you all to cross and Ms. Kyler Green to direct. Ms. Schoaf, is there any Indian child heritage in this case?
No, sir.
What's the permanency goal at this time?
Family reunification.
And at this time, the children are placed where?
Scarlett is with paternal grandmother Marcy Green. Paisley is with fictive Kim Emily Venegas.
Are those placements safe and appropriate in meeting the needs of the children?
Yes, sir.
You believe it's in the best interest of the children to remain in those placements?
Yes, sir.
And are the children up to date on all of their checkups?
They are.
Any concerns at this time that need to be addressed?
Paisley, it does have a referral for a cardiology appointment that is scheduled for the 21st of this month. And she is receiving occupational therapy once a week and will be having a skeletal exam next week due to the ECI evaluation.
So she's got a cardiology referral. She's going to have a skeletal exam next week. And what was the other thing?
She receives occupational therapy once a week.
Any of the other children showing any concerns or delays? Or the other child, excuse me.
Scarlett is behind. Scarlett is receiving Ritalin and clonidine to help with behavioral management. But medical wise, other than wetting the bed that has reduced, that is her only concern.
So you believe those concerns are being appropriately addressed?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Are Scarlett's educational needs being met?
Yes, sir. She is currently going to school and she receives services and aftercare to help her catch up on her reading.
Who's her educational consultant? Is it Miss Venegas? I'm sorry, Miss Green?
Yes, sir.
Our decision maker, I'm sorry. Is that in her best interest?
Yes, sir.
Is the current visitation schedule appropriate?
Yes, sir.
Are you asking for any changes to it?
No, sir.
Are the visits with the parents and the children appropriate?
For the most part, yes, sir.
What concerns do you have about visitation and with which parent?
On occasion, Miss Bentz does state stuff that will get Scarlett upset. It's usually if Miss Bentz dislikes something, Scarlett takes it to the extreme.
Okay. Is this a situation where Miss Bentz needs redirection?
She does. I've moved the visits to be supervised with Children Matter, even virtual visits. So they are helping with redirecting those.
Is she responding well to the redirection?
Yes, sir. They have been improving.
Is Miss Bentz in compliance with her family plan of service?
Partial.
Mr. Roscoe
is in compliance.
Mr. Bentz?
In compliance.
Why is Miss Bentz only in partial compliance?
She waited a very long time to get going with family violence prevention services for the domestic violence classes, originally stating she did not need domestic violence as an offender. She has completed the paperwork and is scheduled now to start March 20th, but at this point, of course, has not started due to the delay in signing up.
Okay. Do all three parents have a copy of their family plan of service?
Yes, sir.
Do you believe they all understand what's expected of them?
Yes, sir.
Have you talked to Ms. Bentz about the things that you're concerned about?
Yes, sir.
As of today, is it safe to return the children to any parent?
It is safe to return Scarlett to Daniel Rasco.
But it's not safe to return Scarlett to Miss Bentz or Paisley to either of her parents?
Yes, sir.
Are you asking that the children remain in the temporary managing conservatorship of the department?
Yes, sir.
Is that in the best interest of the children?
Yes, sir.
And do you believe it's in the best interest of Scarlett to go back and live with Mr. Roscoe?
Yes, sir.
Has anybody talked to Scarlett about that? That you're aware of?
Yeah. Miss Deborah Fuller has.
Okay. Have you talked to Scarlett about it?
I've touched bases a little bit regarding who she wants to live with, but not specifically with Mr. Roscoe in regards to placing her in New York.
All right, Miss Kyler Green.
Thank you, Your Honor. Ms. Schoaf, if the court does place Scarlett with Mr. Roscoe, will you still be monitoring this placement?
Yes, ma'am.
How often?
We'll be doing minimum virtual visits weekly, and we will be scheduling to be doing in-person visits as well up in New York.
And you've also had an opportunity to see Ms. Roscoe and Scarlett when they've had their in-person visits over the holidays?
I did not get to see the visit, but I was able to get feedback afterwards.
Okay. Do you have any concerns about that feedback?
No, ma'am.
Is Mr. Roscoe in compliance with all of the parole obligations he has as well?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Do you have any concerns about the safety of Scarlett if she were to be sent to live with him?
No, ma'am.
And the grandfather whom Mr. Roscoe lives with, is he safe?
Yes, he is.
Okay. Thank you. Your Honor, nothing further.
Ms. Acosta.
Thank you, Your Honor. Ms. Schoaf, what services has Mrs. Bentz completed?
She is engaged in parenting classes, and she has one class left. I'm sorry, one class remaining, on that one, and she has completed her psychological evaluation and is currently engaged in individual counseling.
Okay, and with regard to the domestic violence course, has she completed any kind of domestic violence classes?
She completed on her own prior to myself getting the case, a victims program online that she took a test. She said she did some reading material and took a test for.
Okay, and she provided that certificate to you?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, and she currently is scheduled to begin domestic violence classes with the classes that were referred by the department, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. With regard to Mr. Roscoe, what is he on parole for?
For financial crimes.
Okay. Does he have any other concerning criminal history?
No, ma'am.
Where was he when this case started?
He was incarcerated.
Okay. And how long will he be on parole?
I believe it's 3 years.
What services has he completed in New York?
He has completed a psychological evaluation, parenting classes, maintaining with his probation officer, and individual counseling.
Okay. And has Mrs. Bentz expressed any concerns about his prior drug history to you?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And did you do anything to look into that?
I have spoken with his probation officer. He is tested on a regular basis. His probation officer has no concerns in regards to that.
Okay. Did he ever complete any kind of drug treatment or a drug and alcohol evaluation during this case?
No, ma'am.
Given that there have been concerns expressed by one of the parties in this case that there was prior drug history, do you think that that would be important for a parent in one of these cases?
He has had sobriety for 3 years, and without a positive test or admission, he would not qualify for the assessment for me to be able to request.
Okay. Has he addressed any of that in counseling?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And you receive all of those counseling notes?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. You said that moving was discussed with Scarlett and she's been asked where she wants to go. Has she told you where she wants to go?
Yes, ma'am.
And what has she said?
She states she wants to live with me.
With you?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. With regard to Mr. Roscoe's father, what kind of investigations have been done to make sure that his home is safe and stable?
I've spoken with references up there and conducted searches, and have no concerns have come up.
Okay, and have you visited the home?
I've had numerous virtual visits.
But you haven't physically gone up there and seen the home, is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, and if you're going to be sending a child out of state to New York away from the rest of her family, do you think that it would be important to actually go there and see where she's going to be living?
If the motion's approved, I will be actually flying up here If the motion's approved, I will be flying up there to go place her and to confirm the home.
How is she going to visit with her siblings and her mother from New York?
They will be virtual visits.
Will the mother have an opportunity to continue having in-person visits with her daughter?
Yes, I'll be having a staff with that so we can figure out how to arrange that, because do not have the specifics on how we'll be able to make in-person visits happen at this time.
Okay, well, how were in-person visits arranged for Mr. Roscoe?
She visited him during New Year's and then during spring break, which is scheduled right now.
Okay, and did Mr. Roscoe pay for those visits, or did Belong pay for those visits?
Objection, relevance, Judge.
Your Honor, it's relevant because if they're planning to take this child to another part of the country and they're saying, well, mom's just going to get virtual visits and then she has to figure it out if she wants an in-person visit, I want to know how they were accommodating Mr. Roscoe.
Overruled. I want to know too.
The visit over New Year's was paid for by Mr. Roscoe's family. The visit for spring break, Miss Green's ticket was paid for by Michael Roscoe, and the department paid for Scarlett's ticket.
Okay, so the department was paying for Scarlett to go back and forth?
Only for this one, the first time Mr. Roscoe's family paid for it.
Okay. What do you see in-person visits looking like for mom if Scarlett is moved?
I do not know at this time. That would be something that I would have to staff with my supervisor.
Do you think that it would be prudent to do that prior to moving a child out of state?
We could. I feel like we could be able to staff that at any time, and we can staff it immediately.
But mom right now has court-ordered visits, correct?
She does.
Okay, and moving the child to New York would interfere with some of those visits if she's in another state. Isn't that also correct?
It would, however, most of her visits are already virtual, so it would be very similar to what she's experiencing now.
What does the mother need to do to have increased visits with the children at this point in time?
To show more progress in her individual therapy and to begin her domestic violence classes.
Okay, and what specifically what specific type of progress do you want to see in her individual counseling?
I'd like to show accountability in addressing the reasons for removal.
Okay. Is Scarlett in a safe, appropriate placement right now?
She is.
Okay, and is she currently in school?
She is.
And if she's moved to New York right now, that would mean she would be moving in the middle of the school year, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Do you think that it would be good for a child to at least finish out the school year prior to having her move from this state to another one?
Ideally, I believe it would be. This is actually already Scarlett's third school this year, this school season.
So even more so, she needs stability, educational stability, correct?
Objection, argumentative, and asked and answered, Judge.
Your Honor, I didn't ask if even more so she would need educational stability. This is in response to her answer.
Overruled.
You can answer the question.
I do agree she does need educational stability.
Okay. What plans are there to keep her in contact with her siblings if she's moved to New York?
She'll continue having virtual contacts with her siblings.
And is there any plan for her to have in-person contact with those siblings?
Not at this moment.
Why?
Your Honor, and I object because that's been asked and answered more than once. She said that we would staff it to see what the visits would look like for the siblings. And so, you know, we need to focus on
Your Honor,
a different area. If we're going to ask the same questions over and over, we're going to be here all day.
Your Honor, they're planning to try to move this child to another state, away from her siblings, away from her mother, and they don't really seem to have a plan as to how this child is going to stay in contact with the mother or the kid or her siblings. So it doesn't really seem like this is very well thought out. That's the only reason why I'm asking these questions.
I'm going to object to sidebar. None of these are questions or objection.
The first time I overruled it, but Ms. Shelf has explained that they need to answer some of these questions as time goes by. So I feel like we've gotten the answers we're going to get. So I'm going to sustain the objection.
I'll move on.
And I just want to make sure everybody knows, I'm going to give this some time, but this wasn't an announcement for an hour or two. It was just supposed to be a quick hearing. So let's keep it quick.
I'm almost finished, Judge.
Okay.
With regard to Ms. Bentz's family domestic violence classes, is there anything that Belong can do to facilitate completion of the classes moving forward?
I will continue encouraging her to complete them. I have reached out to the provider, and I am supposed to be speaking with them on Monday, trying to get her a sooner appointment.
Okay, and given that she's in substantial compliance with the rest of her services and that the last one she needs to continue with is domestic violence, are you opposed to increasing visits with the children at this time?
I'm going to object to misstatement of the evidence. Nobody ever testified to substantial compliance. The testimony was partial.
Same.
Considering that she's engaged in parenting and she has one left, considering that she's engaged in individual counseling, considering that she's completed a psychological and that the last service that she has to continue with is domestic violence, do you think that it's appropriate to increase visits with the kids?
No, ma'am.
Why?
Because the reason for this case is due to domestic violence, and that has not been addressed yet.
I'll pass the witness, Judge.
Mr. Saldivar.
Yes, thank you, Judge. Would you classify Mr. Roscoe as a non-offending parent in this case?
Yes, sir.
Okay, and when he was released from jail, did he immediately engage in all of his services?
Yes, sir.
Has he been open and honest with the department?
Yes, sir.
And you said that he's had a prior in-person visit with Scarlett, and that went well. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Do you have any concerns for Mr. Roscoe at this point?
No, sir.
Do you believe that he can provide a safe and stable home for his child?
Yes, sir.
And have you got any feedback from his therapist regarding reunification with his child?
Yes, sir. His therapist is in support of the reunification.
Okay. And the therapist was aware of this motion? Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And now Scarlett had some behavioral issues throughout this case. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Has Mr. Roscoe been able to work with Scarlett throughout those behavioral issues that you've seen?
Yes, sir.
Has he been appropriate when she has a rough day when they have their visitation?
He has.
Okay. And is Scarlett bonded with Mr. Roscoe's father?
Yes, she is.
Okay. And would you classify the relationship as a strong relationship?
Yes.
Okay. And do you believe that Mr. Roscoe's father could be protective as well?
Yes, I do.
Now, you mentioned earlier in your testimony that there's concerns that Ms. Bentz has not addressed the accountability of the removal. Can you elaborate on what that meant?
The case came in due to domestic violence. Ms. Bentz does state that she did not commit any actions as an offender and has not addressed those.
Has Scarlett made any allegations against Ms. Bentz regarding physical violence?
Yes.
And briefly, what are those allegations?
Your Honor.
I'm going to object to hearsay at this point with regard to those allegations.
Judge, this is a child subject to the suit. They opened the door about visitation and why it shouldn't be in person, Judge. It's relevant for your determination going forward.
And Your Honor, I'm requesting that the court admonish Ms. Bentz to stop reacting to every question and answer that is in testimony.
I noticed the same thing, Ms. Bentz. When you're in court, you got to treat it like a card game. Don't react to everything that happens. Okay, just maintain the same composure.
I will. I'm sorry.
All right. The objection was to hearsay, correct?
Yes, Your Honor.
What's the purpose of eliciting the testimony that you're seeking, Mr. Saldivar? Just let me hear you say it.
Judge, there was multiple questions about visitation, mother's visitation. There's testimony of accountability for not taking accountability for actions. My concern is the child's making outcries that Ms. Bentz has personally attacked her. She is the victim and Ms. Bentz is the abuser. And so in-person visitation, I believe is concerning. It's not in the best interest of the child at this point. It should be addressed through therapy.
Yeah, I don't believe child's outcries are hearsay.
Yeah, I don't either. Overruled. And I think Ms. Schoaf, she's a custodian of the records and she's a caseworker on the case. So she's a trustworthy source. So I'm going to overrule the hearsay objection. You can answer the question, Ms. Schoaf.
Scarlett has stated that her mother was choking and attempting to drown her in a bathtub, and that Mr. Bentz had to sit on Grace to get her to stop the incident. She has also stated that while in a vehicle one day, that she told her, Scarlett, and her sisters that they were all going to die today.
Okay. And is that concerning behavior to the department or belong?
Yes.
Do you believe that subjecting in-person visitation with Ms. Bentz is causing harm or some kind of emotional damage to Scarlett at this point?
Yes, sir.
Has that been addressed in therapy with her therapist?
I have mentioned the concerns during the visits. I'm not sure if that has been specifically addressed.
Okay. Now, given the gravity of the outcry of Scarlett, do you believe that the counselor should make the determination how visitation should happen with Ms. Bentz?
Yes.
No further questions, Judge.
Ms. Pearsall.
Thank you, Honor. I know you testified that Mr. Bentz is in compliance, but could you tell the court specifically what he has done?
Yes, ma'am. He has completed parenting classes. He is engaged in individual therapy and anger management, along with domestic violence classes. He does take extra classes for relationship/parenting therapy as well. He is compliant with his random drug testing as well.
Okay, so he completed parenting and provided you with a certificate?
Yes, ma'am.
And have you received any feedback from his individual therapist?
Yes, ma'am.
And does it say that he's very engaged and very honest and is really learning and trying to improve?
Yes, ma'am, it does.
Now, you said he took anger management and domestic violence classes as those two separate classes?
Yes, those are two separate ones, anger therapy, and then the domestic violence is separate.
And then he went out on his own and obtained even more classes for parenting?
Yes, ma'am.
And in general, is he, this entire case, honestly, even pre-status hearing in pre-262, kept trying to figure out what to do and how he can do it, and has been fully engaged and really attempting to work his service plan?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Now, you said he's taking random drug tests. There are no concerns to those, correct?
Correct.
And is he getting fully employed?
Yes, he is.
Okay. And has been since before this case began?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And does he have housing?
Yes, he does.
At the last semi-hearing we had, Judge Falkenberg increased Mr. Bentz's visitation, correct?
Yes, ma'am. We increased it to 2 hours.
2 hours per week?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And how many of those has he had?
I know for sure one, possibly two.
And can you update the court as to how those go?
He is doing very well with those visits. He makes sure he brings supplies for his visitation. He also is asked what Paisley is learning during her ECI treatments so that way he can work on those during the visits as well.
Does the department at this point have any objection to further increasing kids' visits?
I would like to see how March goes, and then we can staff at the end of March to go ahead and increase those.
And what would you want to increase them to at the end of this month?
If everything goes well, we can look at increasing for 3 hours if it's approved by all parties.
Would you have any objection to the court ordering today that at the end of March, if visits continue to go well, his visits increase to 3 hours weekly?
As long as visits go well and he remains in compliance, no, ma'am, I would not have an objection to that.
Okay. Now let's switch to Scarlett for a few minutes. As of now, is her mother having in-person or virtual visits with her?
They have been virtual since being moved to Houston, with the exception of 2 visits.
So in reality, if she continues to have virtual visits once she's moved to New York, it'll be the same as what's been happening now?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And have Scarlett and Paisley had visits?
They've had virtual visits.
Okay. So if she's moved to New York, will these virtual visits continue?
Yes, ma'am.
You know, though granted that probably benefits Scarlett a little more than Paisley. But this is what I get it. Will it be exactly the same as it has been in the girl lives?
Yes, ma'am.
Based on all the outcries and you working with the parents in this case, do you believe that Scarlett will feel safer if she's further away from her mother?
Yes, ma'am.
I'm going to object to speculation.
It was speculative, but she already answered the question. I would have sustained that.
And you testified that the mother is in therapy. Have you gotten her therapy notes and feedback?
I have spoken with the therapist on several occasions. Yes, ma'am.
And so as the worker in charge of the case, is it your understanding that mother is making no progress in therapy?
At this time, yes, ma'am.
And despite the fact that mom has finished some services, has she continued to engage in violent behavior against Mr. Vance throughout this case?
Yes, ma'am.
Including some potentially criminal activity?
Your Honor, I'm going to object if anything that Ms. Schoaf is testifying to she has no personal knowledge of.
Okay, that's 2 different objections, and I'm not seeking hearsay.
What is your lead objection, Mr. Colston?
Both hearsay and she has no personal knowledge of it.
Your Honor, she's the custodian of the record, and she has police reports and other records that document Ms. Vance's continued violence.
And she had discussed it with both parents in this case, which is not hearsay.
I've already designated her as a custodian of the records for the purposes of this hearing. And Ms. Schoaf, is the information that you're talking about information that you received from a review of the file and records in the file?
Yes, sir.
Overruled.
You can answer the question.
Yes, ma'am. There's been continued violence.
Okay, and potential criminal behavior specifically by the mother against Mr. Betts, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, and so the fact that she has attended some classes isn't really helpful if her behavior obviously hasn't changed in any way.
Yes, ma'am.
No other questions?
Ms. Fuller.
Ms. Schoaf, I'll start off with Mr. Bentz. I mean, his visits go extremely well, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Initially, was there a concern that he was not completely honest in his anger management and his domestic violence classes?
Yes, ma'am.
But once he was provided some documentation that the department had received, he decided to open up more with his providers, correct?
Correct.
And he has begun to take responsibility for his part in the domestic violence and the situation where his child was removed.
Yes, ma'am.
And do you feel because of that, he is actually learning in this process to become a better parent?
Yes, I do.
And he's working really hard to do that?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. In regards to Mr. Roscoe, you've watched his virtual visits, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And he handles them extremely well, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And Scarlett at times can try to test him, but he reacts appropriately, calmly, and handles everything as a parent should.
Yes, ma'am.
And in regards to his father and his support system up in New York, do you think that'll be beneficial to Scarlett?
I do.
And prior to Scarlett even coming into care, she moved from school to school, did she not?
She did.
And she was placed with different individuals, with her mother, different boyfriends, different stepdaddies, a lot of things going on in her young life.
Yes, ma'am.
And earlier you talked about the drowning incident that she has said that she was being drowned by her mother. That's also documented in a police report and by a neighbor, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And even her school, the counselor in her school, and Kyle, has indicated that she announced it to the whole class.
Correct.
And then there was a separate incident where she choked Scarlett to the point that Mr. Bentz actually had to intervene.
I believe it's the same incident.
Okay. And in regards to the incidents where she tells the children, we're all going to die today, that's actually happened more than once. And it's documented by police reports, correct?
I would have to double check on the more than once portion.
Okay. And so those type of activities, how traumatic do you think that is to this young child?
Very.
And as Mr. Saldivar asked you, the fact that the virtual visits, they go okay with Miss Benz, so, correct?
Yes.
But in person, that she has to confront the person who has abused her so many times in her young life, how detrimental is that to Scarlett?
It can be very detrimental.
Okay. And do you feel it's important for her to be able to make the connection with her dad in a safe and stable home?
Yes, ma'am.
And you mentioned that that Paisley has to have a skeletal exam, correct?
Yes.
And is that because ECI has indicated they feel that she may have been physically harmed, and they want to make sure that whether she's healing from any type of injuries?
Yes, ma'am.
And so does that also make you wonder about the appropriateness of placing the children back into the care of the parents at this time?
Yes, ma'am.
And in regards to Ms. Bentz, how long did it take for her to actually admit that she had this problem with violence?
She has not admitted.
Correct. And she actually, even during this case, broke out the window of Mr. Bentz's car.
Correct.
And trashed his house.
Yes, ma'am.
And so she may be in partial compliance, but do you feel she's learned anything?
Not at this moment, no.
Okay. And you did say that Scarlett said she wants to live with you, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
I mean, she's told me that too. And that just tells me you are working really hard and you are doing a great job with her. Do you feel that Mr. Roscoe will be able to find all the services, that the school, the doctors, everything needed for Scarlett to excel up in New York?
Yes, ma'am. He actually already has found those providers.
Okay. And do you think it's important for Scarlett to have an opportunity to heal from what she has suffered so much through her young life?
Yes, ma'am.
And you're willing to monitor this situation, go up to New York and do virtual visits consistently, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And do you have any concerns whatsoever at this time with placing Scarlett with Mr. Roscoe?
No, ma'am.
And you're able to contact his parole or probation officer?
Yes.
And talk to his father?
Yes, ma'am.
And do you feel you're getting the appropriate feedback you need to ensure that Scarlett's going to be safe?
Yes, ma'am, I do.
Okay. I'll pass the witness, y'all.
Follow up, Ms. Carla Green.
No, Your Honor, thank you.
All right, we've put about as much time into this as I'm going to give it, unless somebody else has a really good witness they want to put on. Anybody else planning to call another witness?
No, Your Honor.
Argument? Department?
Your Honor, the department agrees with authorization to place. Thank you.
We'll go down the list. Ms. Acosta?
Your Honor, my client is opposed to the authorization to place with Mr. Roscoe. She has expressed to the parties in this case that he has a prior drug history that is concerning, that, and through the testimony of Ms. Schoaf, that it's never been addressed. It wasn't addressed in this case. I understand that people are saying he's the non-offending parent, but he was not around at the beginning of this case because he was incarcerated. So I wouldn't necessarily consider that a non-offending parent. He wasn't around because of his own actions. A removal might have been avoided at the very beginning if he hadn't been incarcerated, but we don't know. With regard to Scarlett being moved there and staying there now, this child, through the testimony of the caseworker, has been to 3 different schools so far this year, and now they're planning on moving her to yet another one 3 months before the end of the school year. Just for education's sake, I would think that she should stay at least in the school she's in now until the end of the school year. I would request that mom be considered to be in compliance, and if not that, in partial compliance, as the department is requesting that she be found to be in based on her engagement in services. I would request that nobody testified to Scarlett not wanting visits with her mother, so I would request that the visits continue. I understand that Ms. Schoaf and Ms. Fuller are saying that she's being, forced to engage in visits that she shouldn't be forced to engage in. But the fact is, no one has testified that she doesn't want to see her mother. And if there's any way to repair the relationship, then I think that if she's not requesting that those visits not continue, then they should continue. And I would also, just in close, I would request that I be provided with all of Ms. Spence's and the children's therapy notes moving forward in this case. Thank you.
Mr. Saldivar?
Yes, Judge, thank you. My client is the non-offending parent, Judge. He immediately was released from jail and hit the ground running with services. He's done everything the department has asked him to. He's provided proof that he has a safe and stable home for his daughter. He's built that relationship back up with his daughter. There was some issues about parent alienation, and he's been working with Scarlett to overcome those issues, and he's established a relationship with her. We've already had an in-person visit go well. There's a spring break visit planned, Judge, but we want Scarlett to stay there with her father. There's no evidence that there's a danger. He has a safe and stable home. I believe that placement of the child is mandatory at this point with him. We have the department in agreement. We have the ad litem and CASA in agreement that she should be with her father. As far as I know that the drug use was brought up, Judge, he's 3 years sober. There's no allegations of that being an issue at all. He's being supervised for the next 3 years through parole for a fraud crime that has no violence or violent history on that. His father is also there as a support for him, and his mother in Houston is also going to be a support and involved in this child's life as well. They have asked Mr. Roscoe and his father if they can facilitate visits with siblings. They're willing to do that. As far as visits with the mother, Judge, this child has made multiple outcries, even to the extent of saying it at school in front of her peers, that her mother has placed her life in danger, not one time, but multiple times. And subjecting this child to do in-person visits with her abuser is a little outrageous to me that they're considering that without having input from the therapist, whether that's healthy for her or in her best interest to continue those visits, even virtual, when she's gone out to tell anybody who will listen to her that her mother's almost killed her multiple times. Judge, I ask that you order the therapist to assess whether that visitation is appropriate. Ms. Bentz has shown through this case that she's learned nothing about domestic violence. She continues to engage in domestic violence with Mr. Bentz, knowing that the department has eyes on her, and she does the behavior continues, and that is a danger to Scarlett and the other children in this case, Judge. I ask that you order the parties to a family group conference if this motion is approved, so that we can come up with a plan to continue visitation with the siblings and any other concerns that the department needs to work out regarding transporting the child or visitation with any other party.
Your Honor, I'm asking that you find Mr. Benz in compliance with his service plan. I am really impressed with Mr. Benz. Honestly, when this case began, pre-262, he called me so many times. I thought, oh God, he would be my most annoying client for the next year, which he's not. but he keeps me completely updated. He reaches out and says, what else can I do? How can I do it? He's really had to deal with a lot. I mean, if I could figure out how to get him into a victim protection program at this point, I would. What he has to put up with from Ms. Benz is just at a level I don't remember seeing in any prior cases. And we all work a lot of domestic violence cases. And I have to disagree with one thing Mr. Saldivar said. He said domestic violence continues. There is no domestic violence that's continuing. It's Ms. Benz continually breaking the law, stalking him, sending him the worst text messages, making up miscarriages, breaking his car, breaking into his house, stealing literally everything they have. She kidnapped their dog recently and won't give it back. I mean, the level of insanity is just truly mind-boggling. And yet through all of it, he has maintained his job, he's maintained his house, he's done every class, he's made progress, and he's doing more. I'm just so impressed with him. So I'm asking that, one, you find him in compliance. Two, that you order his visits increase, discontinued compliance to 3 hours a week, starting end of March, and that you allow him to start having 3-hour unsupervised visits in April. And Judge, specifically, his baby's birthday is on April 20th, and so they're asking for a visit on April 20th, and we want to make sure that that is unsupervised visit.
The father, Vince, is asking for an unsupervised visit on April 20th.
Well, we'd like it to start at the latest on April 20th, his unsupervised visits. Because that's his baby's birthday. And so we're okay with, the department suggested they go up to 3 hours supervised end of March. And we understand that. We're okay with that. But we want to make sure then they go to unsupervised by, as I said, the latest April 20th.
Ms. Fuller?
I'll start with Mr. Benz again, Your Honor. I have no problem with increasing his visits as long as he continues to work his services. I was really concerned at our last hearing, reading the anger management and domestic violence notes and him not accepting responsibility like he should. So the fact that now he knows we all have the police reports, we all have the audio tape where he also threatened to kill children, that he's addressing that. He actually is. He's accepting responsibility. Is it scary? Yes, it's scary. But he's actually accepting responsibility for everything that that he knows that we know about him, So I'm glad that he's starting to move in that direction. I not ready to say unsupervised at this point because he just made that flip where he accepted responsibility and talked about the threats and everything that he has done as well in the past. And there's a number of police reports. In regards to Mr. Roscoe, obviously I'm in favor of Scarlett going to New York and staying in New York. I think we can work out some type of virtual visitations. That's what she's having now. She has suffered so much trauma as a young child. And no, she's not asking for her not to see her mother because she is so used to that. When a child acts like being choked and being drowned is an everyday occurrence, and that, every parent gets upset and wants to drive in front of an 18-wheeler and kill you. I mean, it's normal for her, and that's what's scary. This child should not think that that's normal. Ms. Spence has learned nothing throughout this case. Like Ms. Pearsall said, she broke into Mr. Bence's car. She trashed his house. She stalks him. She's learning nothing. And her behavior is so scary with these children, and now we have the baby has to have a skeletal evaluation because ECI feels like she could have healing, bones that are healing. So I'm concerned about that Ms. Spence is not on the right track. She may be in partial compliance, but she has learned nothing, in regards to how to maintain her composure. I think she needs to address her mental health issues. I would ask that you order a psychiatric evaluation for her because obviously there's something wrong. But I would ask that you place Scarlett with her dad in New York, not New York City. And we continue to monitor that situation. And that he's going to get her involved in counseling, get her enrolled in school, and do what's best for her. And as I said earlier, and Ms. Shope testified to, she actually wants to live with Ms. Shope. She doesn't know her father as much as she should, only because she's been told he wasn't her father, and that from other boyfriends and paramours that they were the parent and he wasn't. And so that was drilled in her head that he's not your dad. He's not your dad. She's told me that over and over. And now she's getting to know them. know him. She had a great time over Christmas. I think she's going to have a great time next week when she gets there, and then she'll be okay as long as she's still in therapy. But Miss Bentz, during her visits, she makes faces and stuff whenever Scarlett says something positive about the other side of the family. And I mean, I think she's gotten better with that, but it's really concerning to me that what this child has been through, and that she can actually discuss it and elaborate on what happened to her. And she's not 9 years old.
Thank you, Ms. Fuller. Ms. Roden?
Yes, Your Honor. So we cautiously agree with the motion to place Scarlett with Mr. Roscoe. I know you asked the question earlier about Scarlett's desires. I have met with Scarlett in person and talked to her about where she wants to live, and I don't believe it's her desire right now to live with Mr. Roscoe. However, we do believe it's in her best interest due to the option with the other parent this time would put her in physical and emotional danger. We also believe that he has the programs and supports in place to be successful. We've spoke with Mr. Roscoe. He has a crisis counselor that he's already reached out to if there was a crisis that he could contact. He has his father there to provide support. That's the paternal grandfather. The therapy will continue. He's been in contact with the local school district. We do believe it's in our best interest for Belong to continue monitoring that virtually and in person as that goes. And we agree with what Ms. Fuller suggested about the psychiatric evaluation. We would like to see Ms. Bentz complete a full psychiatric evaluation. She is on psychotropic medications. We want to make sure that she's getting everything that she needs and all the help that she needs. We are requesting the FGC and FGC to talk about the mom's access and visitation. We'd like Scarlett's therapist to also have input on that decision as we be made, and we're not in current agreement to changing Mr. Ben's visitation as of today, but we're open to increasing with agreement by all parties and having that conversation by the beginning of April or end of March.
All right. Ms. Kyler Green, as far as the permanency hearing, do you have any rebuttal?
No, Your Honor. Thank you.
Mr. Saldivar, as far as the ATP, do you have any rebuttal?
No, Your Honor.
For the purposes of the permanency review before final order, initial permanency hearing, I'm sorry, court finds that there's no any child heritage in this suit. The permanency goal of family reunification is in the best interest of the children. Court finds that the children are up to date on their medical checkups, and that Paisley's, there's a few different issues that I heard testimony on, cardiology, skeletal exam, occupational therapy. Those concerns are being appropriately addressed. Court finds that the medications that Scarlett is receiving are necessary based on, court finds that those reviews are up to date and that her behavioral management regimen is requiring those. Court finds that her educational needs are being met and she's in aftercare, and that her educational decision maker, Marcy Green, is in her best interest. Court is going to find that the current visitation schedule for Mr. Bentz is appropriate. I'm going to order that the therapist for the child be heavily involved in the frequency and type of visits for Ms. Bentz, and I'll get into that a little bit more in a moment. I'll find that all parents are in compliance with their family planner service at this time, but I am very concerned about Ms. Bentz. I'm very concerned, and I agree 100%. I'm going to order that she have a psychiatric evaluation. These behaviors that I'm hearing, Ms. Bentz, your reactions to what you're hearing, some of the things that are going on, it worries me for you. I'm concerned about you and your future, on top of the fact that I'm concerned about how it affects the child. So I want to get you an evaluation so we can see if there's something that's happening that we're missing and that we need to approach in a different way. I will find that at this time, it's not safe to return Paisley to Mr. Bentz or Miss Bentz. It's not safe to return Scarlett to Miss Bentz, but it is safe to return Scarlett to Mr. Roscoe, and I'm going to order that she be placed with him. as soon as possible, and belongs to cover the expense of getting her to New York. As far as visitation goes, I need the psychiatric evaluation to happen, and I need the temperature of the water in this case to go way down before we start doing in-person visits across the country. So Ms. Bentz, you've got some work to do. And I'm also going to order that the therapist be involved in the frequency and duration of the virtual visits between Ms. Bentz and Scarlett once she is placed with Mr. Roscoe. I'm not saying those visits shouldn't happen. I'm saying that I want a therapist to be involved in the frequency and duration. I'm going to hold off on making any rulings on in-person at this time, and I won't change my mind prior to April 1st. We're going to get through the rest of March before we even revisit the idea of in-person visits between Miss Bentz and Scarlett once she's placed with Mr. Roscoe. I'm going to increase Mr. Bentz's visitation as requested, and I do believe that that April 20th target date is a good date to look at moving to unsupervised, provided he continues to engage and comply with his services. Really proud of the progress that all the parents have made to a certain extent, but especially Mr. Bentz and Mr. Roscoe at this time. You both have really stepped up, and I'm really happy to see that. Ms. Bentz, I think that we just need to get you some different help. I think what we're doing right now is not working, and that's why I'm ordering that evaluation. I'm also going to order the parties to staff the case with a family group conference within 14 days of today's date. So, Mr. Salvar, obviously your ATP is granted. We'll be back for our next hearing, May the 14th, 2024 at 9 a.m. May 14th, 2024 at 9 a.m. That's 2 months. It's a really good time period for a lot of things to happen. And parents, I have to admonish you, the state of Texas gives parents in CPS cases 12 months to demonstrate that you can provide a safe, stable, violence, and drug-free home. You cannot do so, your rights to your child are subject to restriction and or termination. We're still in this case. Just because I'm moving a child doesn't mean that anything is any easier for anybody. In fact, Mr. Roscoe, I think your life, although probably going to be more joyful, is going to get a little more difficult. And you need to be ready to deal with that and be prepared. Sounds like you have a good support system in place. But keep working, keep doing what you're doing. And let's come back in May with some progress so that we can continue to move forward. Ms. Kyler Green, is there anything I failed to address?
No, Your Honor. Thank you.
Your Honor, can I just make one more statement? I want Ms. Bentz to know her daughter loves her. She just needs to get help. Her daughter loves her. She just needs to get help.
It seems like that's the case. It seems like this is one of those situations where we just haven't figured out the right solution for Ms. Bentz yet. And she's responsible for her choices. Everybody's responsible for their choices, but sometimes you're dealing with things and you just don't have the right help in place, and that's what we need to work on. We need to focus our efforts somewhere else. So this psychiatric evaluation is hopefully going to give us what we're looking for. Thank you for that, Ms. Fuller. All right, well, good luck to you all. That's the last case on the docket for today. So thank you all for your time and your service, and if nothing further, all parties are excused. Have a great weekend.